Okay, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
The definite first take.
For sure.
Of this podcast.
Zero problems.
No. It's a special episode, as we are mentioning for the first time,
Yes.
because it's episode 10.
It is.
And what we're learning is 10 episodes in, and we still can't quite get it right without some sort of hiccup. But you, the viewers, wouldn't know that if we didn't.
They wouldn't know that.
confess it.
We open the door once in a while and reveal what's going on behind the scenes.
That's right. So this intro should be even better because
We've had some practice.
We've had some practice.
Yeah.
So 10 episodes in, we're proud of that because
I'm really proud of that.
you know, it's very easy to start these things and be excited about them in the beginning, and a lot of times you sort of lose enthusiasm as it goes on. But it hasn't happened for me yet. It's the highlight of every Sunday is just, hey, what are we talking about today?
It's such a refresher to me, or just like a good way to start the new week. Is I always leave in a good mood because I just love to talk about movies.
Yeah, I think the word I would use is cathartic.
There you go.
There's a lot of times where I'm exhausted from a long week and I'm tired, and with most activities I would say, you know what I really don't want to do is any sort of other activity, but with this one it's like, hey, you know what I really need right now in my life?
To talk about movies.
I just need to sit down with my friend Andy and talk about movies.
Absolutely. People may be tired of us doing them, but we're not tired of doing them.
That's right. And you know, there was a moment where I worried people might get tired of it because some of our numbers looked like they were going down. And then last week, our 80s action movie draft, we had the best numbers that we've had yet.
Shot up. People like the draft, maybe? The draft concept? I don't know.
Maybe just the 80s action movies. Maybe our fellow 80s action movie fans out there really came
I hope so.
To support that.
The Legion of Cobra fans really came through for us.
That's right.
We're all going to get together later and clang axes together in celebration. For unknown reasons, and we're not going to explain why.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be.
Exactly.
Yeah, it could also be, at least for the YouTube channel, that you didn't have to see our faces last week.
That's most likely what it was.
And are we going to learn our lesson from that? No, because we're going to put our faces right back on it this week.
We're not in the business of learning lessons. We're just in the business of talking about movies.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
This week, we're going a little broader.
We are.
With our subject matter. And I just want to say, Andy, you are a paradox to me because you are one of the funniest people that I know.
Stop.
I think you make me laugh as consistently as any of my friends.
Well, thank you.
And you love movies.
I do.
Obviously, you love 80s action movies. We've talked about it.
I do.
We could talk slasher movies. You'd be all in.
I would.
Sci-fi movies, even prestige movies, Nolan movies. You love all types of movies. And yet, I feel like the genre that you are the least inspired by, the least passionate about, is comedy.
It is. I'm confusing to myself because I don't know, and I don't know why that is. I can tell you why it's not. It's not because I have some sophisticated sense of humor and I think all comedies are beneath my, comedy intellect. That's not it at all. This is the most stressful episode we've done for me because all the other episodes I felt pretty confident in being able to talk and make some sense. Comedy is weird to me. I can't figure out why I like what I like. I can't figure out why I don't like what I don't like. It's weird. I don't know how to. This might be our lowest watched episode because it might just be me rambling about why I can't figure out why I like comedies or don't like comedies.
Yeah, we're appealing more to our audience that's also psychology fans this week. We're going to delve deep into the psyche.
We are.
No, but I mean it's a fair point, and honestly, comedy is not my favorite genre.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely lean more towards actions and dramas,
right.
And some of the other things said, not necessarily slashers as much like you.
Yeah.
I probably would put comedies ahead of those. That said, I started going through and just listing some of the important comedies in my life, and I actually had a more significant list than I would have thought.
I did have a similar experience. Once I got rolling, I was able to come out with some, but even looking at my list, I thought maybe if I could visually look at my list, it would make some more sense. No, not at all. Kind of added to the confusion a little bit because it's just all over the place.
Yeah. And that's fair. And, comedy might be sort of the broadest of genres. As I was looking at it, I was like, of course, every genre has their subgenres.
Right.
We've talked about horror movies having several different.
There's a lot of branches on the horror movie tree.
But comedy, man, you go so many branches because you've got. Your sort of absurdist comedies.
Right.
You've got like your spoof comedies. You've got your raunchy comedies. You've got your family comedies.
Yeah.
You've got your sort of dry humor, witty Wes Anderson style comedies.
Yes.
There's just so many different types of comedies, and I'm kind of like you. I was looking at it, trying to go broad and just answer the very generic question:
What makes me laugh?
What makes me laugh?
Yeah, that's what I went with too.
That's amazing that we had the same approach.
Yeah.
So I'll throw it to you, Andy. Did you have any sort of insight as you considered that? What makes you laugh?
Yeah. So one thing I think I did discover when I was making my list is that one thing that really makes me laugh is when you get someone, obviously it's usually a comedian for a comedy, and they're able to kind of create a character. And I guess an example of that would be like Jim Carrey created Ace Ventura. Mm-hmm. And I do think Ace Ventura is funny. I think comedy, I'm going to already go off on a trail here. Sometimes comedy loses its appeal pretty quickly because it's imitated so much. So like Ace Ventura came out, Jim Carrey kind of came out of nowhere a little bit. He was on In Living Color, and he created this character of Ace Ventura. I mean, that's Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everybody my age at the time, which is like 13, is talking like Ace Ventura. So it kind of quickly gets annoying. Now that it's been all these years and I can look back, like that's what I like. Mm-hmm. When someone creates a character, and it can be ridiculous like Ace Ventura is, or something like Bill Murray creating Peter Venkman in Ghostbusters, which, come to find out is basically just Bill Murray being Bill Murray, but just kind of the dry, sarcastic. So it's not one specific thing, but I do like it when someone creates a character and they make it their own, and it's their own unique thing. And like in Jim Carrey's case, it kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, nobody really saw that coming. He was funny on In Living Color, and all of a sudden, Ace Ventura, and he's just it's part of the pulp culture, and it's part of the movie nerd speak, and you're doing impressions and imitations, and so that always makes me laugh.
Yeah, Jim Carrey. I think the reason he exploded like he did is he could hit on so many levels. Like Ace Ventura, for kids, was hilarious because he was just so over the top, expressive,
animated.
Yeah. He was like a live cartoon character.
Oh yeah.
But then it's also like you watch as an adult and you're like, there are so many jokes in here as a kid.
Yeah.
Went right over my head.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Carrey certainly does create memorable characters.
Yeah. Or Will Ferrell created Ron Burgundy.
Yeah.
Anchorman. I mean, that is Will Ferrell's creation, and that's obvious. And those things really have nothing in common, Ace Ventura and Ron Burgundy. But this just goes to my point where it's like, I'm going to create this character, and he's going to be weird and have quirks, and just that usually gets my funny bone.
Yeah. As I was thinking about it, what makes me laugh, I realized sometimes it was easier to figure out what doesn't make me laugh. Like, what are the comedies don't? I'm not really much of a slapstick guy. I'm not really obviously I can appreciate physical comedy, but Three Stooges is just not ever going to be my thing.
Right.
We ran into something. Oh, a guy, gets hurt. That's funny. I realize it's sort of actually an inversion of my favorite serious movie trope, which is smartest guy in the room. Mm-hmm. I think I love the sort of subverting that with people who think they're the smartest person in the room but aren't.
Yeah.
I think that's why Anchorman is one of my favorite comedies.
Yeah.
Anchorman. I think the
just
humor
a bunch
of
of
this
idiots
guy who is so certain that he is smart and classy and important,
and is the complete opposite. That's that's really well put.
And I just love the conflict that brings because again. the people in these movies would be so dislikable if it was serious. If
Yeah.
it's real life, somebody who takes himself as seriously as Ron Burgundy, you would loathe.
Couldn't stand to be around that person for 10
But
seconds.
when it's played for humor, him walking up to somebody and being like, I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
It's hilarious.
it's funny.
The idea that somebody in their head would think that this is a great approach to impress somebody
Yeah.
is to tell them how important
Yeah.
you are. So I love the idea of people who think that they're smarter than they really are.
That's really well put.
Yeah.
I also found too that I find a lot of humor in, and I don't even know how to describe this. What I would call it would be like the Quentin Tarantino humor, where you're getting laughs out of just absurd scenarios or situations. And then, again, this is why this was a hard episode for me, because it's going to make me sound probably a little strange. But like a good example would be in Pulp Fiction, when John Travolta accidentally shoots Marvin, and he goes, "Oh, I shot Marvin in the face." I don't even know how, like I said, I don't know how to define it. Maybe something that is not at all funny, but is made funny through the matter of factness of the dialogue, or I don't know how to even describe it.
Well, and I was gonna kind of get to this again. It's gonna be my next point was that subverting expectations.
Yeah,
I love humor that's gonna take what we expect to happen and flip it on its head.
Yeah.
And that is a great moment of that, because when you're sitting there and you're driving and talking to a guy with a gun and just a conversation's happening, you never think we're gonna hit a bump and the gun's gonna go off and the guy's this really violent act's gonna happen out of nowhere. And it does, and then like I said, his reaction is so just like, oops. It's like he spilled a drink.
Yeah,
in the car.
He's so matter of fact about it.
Yeah,
I just shot Marvin in the face, which is exactly what he did. And then Sam Jackson's playing off of that, and that just gets me every time.
Yeah, I do think we've talked about before how so many genres feel like they're disappearing, but I think the reality is there's just so much genre blurring going on now.
Yes.
I think someone like Tarantino's probably has a lot of responsibility in that, because his movies like Pulp Fiction did. I mean, it's hard to categorize what genre is Pulp Fiction.
But it's definitely not a comedy.
Right, but there's so much
But you get a lot of laugh out of it.
Yeah.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the last time I watched that movie, I laughed a lot. I mean, and again, it's all in just these absurd situations. Like Leonardo DiCaprio with a flamethrower. It's just like comedy built out of just these absurd scenarios, but played seriously.
Yeah.
Like it's not like he walks out and he's doing some funny dance with the flamethrower and winking at the camera. It's funny because of how serious he is and how serious he's taking himself.
Yeah, it's funny because you believe it could really happen in real life.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite funny moments from that movie actually did happen in real life. It's like a quick flash to his character training with the flamethrower, and he's delivering his action movie line. He just stops and goes, "Whoa, that's too hot. Anything we can do about that heat?" The other
that
guy
was
goes,
actually DiCaprio.
It's a flamethrower.
Yeah.
He's like, right.
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
It's so true. You can just picture an actor just be like, "Whoa, this is too hot. Can we do something about it?" And the guy training him just, "What do you want us to do with a flamethrower to make it less hot?"
Yeah.
So great humor because it feels so like real. Like I could picture the guy actually doing that.
And like to your point, to me, that's way funnier than, oh, this guy ran into a wall, or this guy got hit in the crotch with a baseball. Yeah. I mean, stuff like what I was just talking about is 300 times funnier to me than that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I will say, having said all that, one of my other types of humor that I really like is absurdity. I think because I'm a very logical person, and I don't say that as like, oh, I'm very smart. I just mean like my brain type. I'm that thinker type, feeler type. Like I want things to make sense is my personality type. And so for some reason, absurdity humor, which goes, hey, we're going to take everything that makes sense and make it the complete opposite and not make sense. A lot of times I get a lot of humor out of that.
Sure.
So, one of my favorite comedies, and I would call it a guilty pleasure because it's such a stupid movie, is Kung Pao, Enter the Fist, which is a patently like absurd movie. I understand absolutely how dumb it is as I'm watching it, and yet I cannot help but laugh every time that I watch it because of just the absurd silliness of the movie.
I think everyone needs a movie like that in their life. Especially if you're like a movie nerd, because a lot of times, like we've talked about, you gravitate towards like, oh, I like The Godfather, or I like this. Sometimes you just need just a ridiculous movie in your life.
Yeah, and that's it.
It does qualify, yes.
And it really brings up what I think is actually the best thing about comedies. Of course, comedies are great to see in a crowd because when a crowd laughs together, it makes everything
that shared
funnier.
Experience of laughing.
I still one of my most impactful young movie experiences was, of all things, seeing The Nutty Professor in theaters, because the crowd laughed so hard at those family scenes.
Family
Eddie Murphy's
scenes.
playing, like, you couldn't hear half of what was said because the crowd was laughing so loud, but because something about being with that crowd laughing so hard was making me laugh so hard.
Yep.
And now if I watch those scenes, I'd probably be like, why was this so funny?
Yeah.
But being in the theater with everybody just dying laughing, it felt like the funniest thing
That's a great
in the
point.
world.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you're not going to recreate the theater experience all the time. But actually, what I would say comedies are best for is being quotable after the fact.
Yeah.
And most of my favorite comedies, several of my favorite comedies, are movies that I didn't even love the first time I watched them. I was maybe like, that was all right. Anchorman is a prime example of this.
That would be my example, too.
Zoolander was an example of this, where the first time I saw Zoolander, I was like, this movie's stupid.
Yeah.
But then you just start, like, finding yourself throwing lines from it at friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the next time you watch it and you're hearing those lines again, you're laughing because you're just like, that's such a stupid but funny line.
Yeah.
One of my ultimate examples of this, in a movie that I don't really enjoy watching, is Dumb and Dumber.
Okay.
I think Dumb and Dumber is simultaneously so dumb I can't watch it and endlessly quotable.
Yeah.
I will sit around and throw around lines with people and be like, that line is funny.
Yeah.
I just can't watch all of them in succession because it's just so relentlessly stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But it's got so many funny little
good
parts. I think I could watch it probably 5 minutes at a time and enjoy it.
Yeah, I kind of find myself having the same problem sometimes, where I can enjoy a movie much more on like in YouTube clips than I can for the whole movie. And I hate to be that way, because I think movie watching obviously is meant to be start to finish and then absorb the whole movie. And that's why maybe going back to what I was talking about at the beginning, comedies are just tough, because sometimes I can take the moments. And like you said, with you and Dumb and Dumber, where it's like there's a lot of funny parts, but if you sit down for the full hour and whatever, 45 minutes or whatever that movie is, by the end of it, you do kind of go, okay, like I get it.
I've been beat over the head by the dumbness.
Yeah.
But it's like I said, it still is endlessly quotable, and
it really
people
is.
say things to this day like, we'll quote Dumb and Dumber, and when they quote it, I'll laugh and be like, yeah, that's a great line.
It's funny,
movie.
yeah.
But yeah, one other type of comedy that I wrote down, and actually what I wrote down at the end, I was trying to figure out how to make notes. It was so hard to get organized for this one.
My notes look like I was losing my mind, and I was just randomly writing down thoughts that came to my mind.
But I ended with this. I was like, maybe I can really simplify it by just saying 3 movies to describe my humor, because I was trying to narrow it down. I said this. I put Anchorman.
Yeah.
And I described it as that overconfident thing,
Yeah.
like guy who thinks he's the smartest and best person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Kung Pao with the absurdity.
Yeah.
And the last one I wrote was Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And
Okay.
the reason I wrote that one was it kind of goes, it almost connects to the Tarantino conversation, because I think it's actually sort of insightful comedy. Like, it's silly, it's absurd, but there's so many little bits that actually connect on a personal level. Because the movie's essentially about relationships and like how to get over a breakup and like the cycles you go through mentally. And that's probably not even how people would analyze it. People don't talk about Forgetting Sarah Marshall. They're not like, that movie's got a lot of great things to say about breakups.
Right.
But when you actually watch it and pay attention, like, it actually does have a lot of insightfulness around all this humor that people can relate to. And, like early in the breakup where all he can remember is how great the relationship was, and he's having these flashbacks and he's like crying because he can't believe it's gone, and then as he starts to finally like recover and get over it, he starts remembering all the bad from the relationship and that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of good insight, and then it's also just got a lot of great quotable lines. that I use all the time. One of them I use as a teacher is there's a great line with Aldous Snow. He's played by Russell Brand. He's this rock star, and Jonah Hill's this worker at the hotel, and he gives him his demo CD, and later on he sees him. He's like, "So did you listen to my demo? Did you get it? Did you get it?"
Yeah.
And Russell Brand looks at it and goes, "Right, I was gonna do that, but then I just carried on living my life."
Yeah.
And I use that all the time as a teacher. Students would be like, "Did you do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I was gonna do that, but then I just carried on living my life." Because it's great.
It's a great line.
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole conversation too. I think, like you brought up Forgetting Sarah Marshall, like. Because one thing I wrote down is just like the different phases that comedy goes through. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if if you had that in your notes or you want to do it later, but that was definitely something I was thinking about kind of as I was forming my list. And like through my lifetime, what comedy has like the different phases it's gone through.
I definitely, I didn't write as many notes about it. I sort of, as I was separating the genres, started to notice some of that pattern and started thinking about it. Started thinking about like, the mid-90s when I really started paying attention to movies and comedies. It was sort of like that SNL cast run. It was the Sandlers, the Farley and Spade, Mike Myers.
Yep.
Movies that I love and adore to this day. You know, Happy Gilmore.
Happy Gilmore is one that's stood the test of time for me.
Wayne's World, Tommy Boy. Tommy Boy, which I'm sporting a Callahan auto.
You are killing the shirts that match up with our conversation.
Yeah. Unbeknownst to you, that's actually what I do is I just go through my drawer and find a T-shirt that say, "Hey,
this is what we're going to do today."
Attach a topic to this.
Yeah.
So sort of those, and then you've got your early 2000s became the era of like I'm forgetting the guy's name, that Judd Apatow. Yeah. Judd Apatow did all the comedy. He like kind of ran comedy. He just
dominated comedy for a long time.
Yeah, and I mean there's all sorts of others, but those were like two of them that were very clear right off the bat for making the list. Of course, the Farrelly brothers we've talked about before on here that did Dumb and Dumber, and there's something about
they had a run.
They had a run. There was this resurgence of like teen comedies with American Pie and Road Trip and movies like that for a while there in the late 90s, which were eventually spoofed by Not Another Teen Movie, which is a movie I think relaunched the spoof genre, and it had a run.
Scary Movie, that contributed a lot to the spoof genre.
Goodness knows, spoof movies.
I don't
very low hit percentage.
Yeah, I don't like those.
I think,
and there's like 5 or 6 of the Scary Movies. I'm like, holy cow, guys!
There's I like Spaceballs, and
Spaceballs is good. Yeah,
not many others that are actually very good. There's the whole mockumentary genre, which Christopher Guest is kind of the big name
leader
in that
of that
one, and like that's a genre that like or subgenre that I've seen some, and it's always kind of like, this is pleasant enough, but it's just not quite for me.
I agree with you. Like I've watched the like Best in Show, and it's like, man, these guys are smart and they're clever, but it's just not. It just doesn't connect with me in any way.
Yeah. And then what else did I have? I mean, there's just a lot of different ones. There was that. They called them the Frat Pack for a while. Vince Vaughn and
Owen Wilson,
Ben Stiller. I don't even remember who all was involved in it, but basically guys that were in like Old School and I guess Will Ferrell was probably thrown into that. And
Old School, Dodgeball.
Yeah.
There's more, I know.
And all that run. So
it's kind of interesting to see how comedy does go through these clear phases. Or for the longest time, it always felt to me like you'd have like 3, 4, 5, 6 guys. Mm-hmm. Like these are the funny guys. Like in the 80s, it was like Chevy Chase and Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and some of these guys. And then it kind of just cycles. And then, like you said, you got the SNL guys like Mike Myers and Dana Carvey and, who was some of the other ones in there?
Sandler.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of. Chris Rock was kind of in there.
Yeah.
And then it was Will Ferrell and those guys. Then it was the Apatow guys and Seth Rogen and all those guys. And then that's one thing we did talk about in one of our episodes. Somehow we got talking about comedies. And we were saying there's not a group right now of funny guys. If there is, I'm not really aware of it.
Yeah, I think, if I had to think of like who are the biggest comedy stars right now, like Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, so much blending of genre, though. You know, when I was looking back at like what are my most recent favorite comedies, honestly, the two most recent I wrote probably are like Deadpool and Thor Ragnarok, which are both superhero movies because everything's a superhero movie now. But they're the ones that found all the humor in superhero movies. So you know, they're not even just straight comedies, but they are. It's so funny.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Did write Jojo Rabbit. That might have been more recent, actually. But
yeah.
There's other.
But that's again, that's not a straight comedy. Right. I mean, that's got some really dark or some heavy themes. There you go. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So I don't know. But I would say Taika Waititi is probably one of the top voices in comedy right now. Kevin Hart and I don't know. Just not a lot of. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm really right now. I'm just kind of lukewarm about comedy. Like Kevin Hart's a good example. I don't dislike him at all, but just seeing him on a poster or knowing he's going to be in a movie doesn't necessarily get me pumped up.
Nope. Yeah, it doesn't me either.
Because like when I was growing up, there was definitely a run there. Like Jim Carrey's a great example. He got big enough and popular enough, just. Boom. I remember when Liar Liar came out, you knew what the basic idea was, like this guy's a lawyer and he can't lie. And I can remember plain as day in my mind, that poster is literally just Jim Carrey just standing there like maybe he's doing one of these or something. Yeah. And that's the poster. Just Jim Carrey. So basically they're telling you Jim Carrey is enough to get you to this movie. And that movie was a huge hit.
Yeah.
It made a ton of money and it was just sold off of it's Jim Carrey and he's hilarious. Yeah. And he was.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Will Ferrell, I think, was like that for a while.
He was.
It doesn't feel like necessarily. Will Ferrell doesn't even feel like he's making movies right now. To me, is he doing TV? I don't know. Like, what is he doing?
He did. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, he did an Apple TV like mini series with Paul Rudd.
Yeah,
like what was it called, like The Shrink Next Door or something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because like I said, for a while there, it was just. I mean, Anchorman's kind of the same thing. I mean, that's more of an ensemble, but I mean, that's the same thing where the poster was Will Ferrell like sitting at his news desk and like Will Ferrell, Anchorman.
Yeah,
and that was kind of how they sold you the movie because it was just like these guys are funny. Come to the theater and laugh.
Which is funny to me too because Anchorman of all Will Ferrell's movies is the most distinct character where it doesn't feel like I'm watching Will Ferrell. Other than like I know it's Will Ferrell, Ron Burgundy feels like such a
creation, like
such a unique character. Yeah. Like I mean, part of it is the look. Like he clearly doesn't have Will Ferrell's normal like curl hair.
Got the big mustache.
He's got the big mustache. So
the very dated suits and stuff like that.
And his voice just a little different. He's got that newscaster. I'm Ron Burgundy voice. And it just. When I watch it, I literally feel like I'm watching Ron Burgundy. I forget that it's just Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
But it's a great one. I just feel like before I forget, I want to go back and mention one big name in comedy we would be remiss to not mention is Eddie Murphy, who was the biggest star in the world for a stretch there in the 80s.
And I had Coming to America on my list.
It's such a good movie.
It's such a good movie. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, he just created this funny character. Prince Azim, I think, is his name in that movie.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I think that's his name.
Yeah.
Akeem or Azim or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, it's just a funny character. And he's not funny because, like Ron Burgundy, like you're saying, he's got the big bushy mustache and stuff. He just looks like Eddie Murphy. Yeah. But it was just a funny, kind of a unique creation. And it's also, too, like when I grew up, it seemed like they were thinking of, like, fun, creative ideas for the movies. Mm-hmm. Like Coming to America, like he's a prince, but he's tired of living this royal life, so he goes and slums it in the city. Yeah. Like that's a funny idea.
And he's almost the straight man character in that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, like
they get a lot of comedy out of the fish out of water scenario.
But his character doesn't have many of the greatest lines. Of course, he's playing a lot of Eddie Murphy's playing a lot of side characters that have a lot of funniest lines, but his character's whole thing is that he's just endlessly sort of optimistic and confident
and it's just funny
and nice and pleasant in this New York City environment that's very not nice and pleasant. And that's where they mine for humor. But yeah, you're right. And it's kind of unbelievable to me that I don't feel like Eddie Murphy stopped being able to be funny, but man, it just felt like his career just
he has a strange
stopped
career.
making funny stuff.
When he's funny, he's funny. When he's not funny, it's brutal.
Yeah.
It's brutal. Like Norbit or some of those just movies where you're like, man, you're funny. Like, why are you doing this?
And then every once in a while, he would do like a dramatic role and be like really
He's
good in
good,
it.
yeah.
And you're like, how is he? But like, I feel like he's never really had that career revival that it felt like he should have at some point. Maybe Tarantino just needs to put him in a movie. And
Anytime someone's struggling, you're just like, just do a Tarantino movie. Well, they better hurry because Tarantino's getting ready to do his last movie.
That's true.
I don't know where's there's a good place to work this in, but I do want to throw out something else too. You asked what kind of tickles my funny bone, and I'm going to do so bad on this episode because I'm not good at articulating how I feel about comedies. But I also like one of my secret favorite movies that not a lot of people know is Smokey and the Bandit. That movie makes me laugh, but you ask me why, and I don't know. Like, I think sometimes there's something funny about. I think sometimes those older movies can be funny because of the way they're dated, and sometimes things just age in a good way. Like Smokey and the Bandit would be a really hard movie for like kids today to understand because you have to understand like Burt Reynolds and in the 70s, and it's just so funny to me how that movie really has no plot at all. Just like, hey, you got to smuggle some beer, bootleg beer, and they're just like, all right, Burt Reynolds, just be Burt Reynolds, and you're just driving this car, and they set up these scenarios where like they so clearly just want Burt Reynolds to have his Burt Reynolds charm, and really the plot of the movie is incidental. But I can watch that movie and I laugh a lot. Like the CB talk is funny, Jerry Reed's funny, but I really don't know why. I just don't know. Like I'm the worst host to have on this episode because I can't pinpoint why certain things are funny to me.
I would think, and I'm far from that familiar with Smoking the Bandit. Like I know it and I've seen clips and stuff, but I've never like watched the whole movie.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those movies that you can just tell they had a good time making.
I
think sometimes
there you go.
That's exactly what, like, you just feel like you're having the good time with the people.
Like you're along for the ride.
Yes,
that's what I was trying to articulate. Like it's these people who at the time were like cool. Like Burt Reynolds was cool in the 70s, like the coolest guy in the world.
Yeah.
And like it's just Burt Reynolds having fun, and you're just like a passenger in the seat with him.
Yeah.
Smoking the Bandit probably couldn't really even be qualified as a comedy necessarily, but it's a movie that makes me laugh just because of the joy of the characters, I guess, and just how much fun they're having.
Yeah. I think the modern guy who's really good at that feel is Richard Linklater. Mm-hmm. Of course, Dazed and Confused is like the ultimate like just hang out movie.
Yeah.
And honestly, again, I think that goes back to the Tarantino thing. We talked about it before, how sometimes his movies are just you want to hang out with these characters. Mm-hmm. I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is just that. Like, you get the sense that DiCaprio and Brad Pitt were having a lot of fun playing these characters, making the movie.
And you're kind of just in the room with them.
And they're super cool guys.
Yeah.
And you're like, I wish I was there just hanging out with them doing this.
It's like you got invited to sit at the cool lunch table. And you just get to sit there and listen to these cool people being funny and charming and interesting. And that's funny.
Yeah. And I honestly, like, man, I'll tell you, I rewatched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood after we talked about it, and I really didn't expect there to be this much Tarantino on our comedy podcast,
I know.
But here we are. I really genuinely think it is my favorite DiCaprio performance, and I know most people wouldn't go to that, but he does so much in that movie, and I think it's the most fun he's having in a movie. Mm-hmm. And it, of course, again, there's a little bit of Ron Burgundy to his character when you think about it. Like, it's this kind of
he doesn't know how,
and he's he's kind of playing this. He's not a conservative, but he hates the hippies and like that sort of thing. And I just get the sense that DiCaprio was having a lot of fun playing this guy who's probably nothing like Leo, but just this. And then, of course, Brad Pitt, his type of humor, like,
he's so funny in that movie.
It's so like subtle, but like when he smokes the acid cigarette at the end, and he's talking to his dog, and he just waves his hand, and all of a sudden he's like, "Whoa," like it's it's this like simple saying, "Hey, Brad, wave your hand and just act like you're tripping," and you say, "Whoa."
And that's why comedy, I think, is so hard to pin down.
Yeah.
Because you describe, like, a guy smokes an acid-laced cigarette, and you're like, well, is that funny? Yes, it is funny when Brad Pitt is the guy.
Yeah.
Or, like, the last time I watched it, I was cracking up when, at the very end of the movie, when Brad Pitt and then Tex, their face, he goes, "Are you real?" And Tex just goes, "I'm as real as a donut." And then he adds a couple choice words afterwards. I was telling you, I had to pause the movie because I was laughing so hard at him saying, "I'm as real as a donut." And it's just the way he says it.
And Brad Pitt's character just giggles real silly.
And then they have like this, like 20 seconds where they're just laughing back and forth.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately my funny bone is just humor in absurd situations, I guess.
Yeah.
As again, like kind of the opposite of, a guy got hit in the crotch with a football. Like, that's not funny to me.
Right.
What we're describing right now is funny.
Yeah, the little like this twist on this situation that makes it funny. Like they're getting robbed, but they're getting I guess like
home invasion type
situation, and he's high, so everything's funny to him.
Yeah, and it's like that's extra funny because they're playing off a real life like horrifying scenario, and it's just great.
Yeah, and that goes back to the forgetting Sarah Marshall thing, like just taking a little twist of what if you go on a vacation to try to get away and not think about your ex, and then you end up at the same hotel and Hawaii is her with her new boyfriend, and you're just stuck in this situation where you're constantly confronting everything. And I'm telling you, I'm not doing a great job of selling Forgetting Sarah Marshall and selling the humor of it. It's so funny.
It is funny.
Although I do have to put the disclaimer, it is a rated R movie for a good reason. Watch it on television with the television edits, people, and it might make it a little more palatable. So should probably put those disclaimers with.
There's some there's some stuff that happens in that movie.
There's a lot of scenes, that
Jason Segel was just really going for it.
He was, in that famous scene that was based on something that actually happened to him in real life. Yep. And as soon as it was over, he said, "I've got to write this down because this will be funny in a movie someday."
Yeah.
And sure enough,
I like him. He's a funny guy.
He is. I do want to kind of bring up the Wes Anderson style of dry wit humor because I actually do really like that.
Do you?
It's not really a go-to for it's never going to be mentioned as my favorite, but I do really enjoy it. I think Owen Wilson is really funny, and I love him in Wes Anderson stuff, just delivering really dry lines.
I wonder if Owen Wilson's kind of like the king of the dry humor.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be in the running for sure. He's got one of my all-time favorite comedy lines in The Royal Tenenbaums, which is a dark comedy. It's very kind of emo comedy. But he's an author in that, and there's this great scene of him walking with these reporters talking about his book. And his line is, "Everybody knows that Custer died at Little Bighorn. What my book presupposes is maybe he didn't." It's so absurd. It's that pseudo-intellectual but this guy's so dumb.
And then when you factor in just Owen Wilson delivering it,
he's dressed in cowboy garb.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Owen Wilson's really funny. He's really funny in a movie that I don't necessarily love, but Meet the Parents.
Yeah,
he is really funny in that movie. Just with that dry, I don't know. He has a very unique style of comedy, I guess you could say.
Yeah, you do.
But so you like Wes Anderson?
I do.
Yeah.
You're not a fan, are you?
No, I'm not. I appreciate the smart writing. I appreciate the humor that isn't, I fell down the stairs. I appreciate all that. To me, those movies are, once I see them, I'm good. Yeah. They're not revisit type of movies to me.
Yeah. I'll say his are definitely I don't know. He's got a 50% hit rate for me.
Yeah.
He's got ones that when they're not hitting, they can be a bit of a slog.
Yeah, a bit of a chore to get through.
The French Dispatch was kind of a slog to get through. But then some of his ones that do hit, I really dig. Like the Royal Tenenbaums.
No, I do like that movie.
Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yeah.
I enjoyed. The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
Yeah.
Which is is another good one.
Yeah.
But it just, again, I do like things that can be really clever, and I think that's he sprinkles enough like really clever stuff into those movies that like I'm just like, oh, that was smart and a different way to think about it that I wouldn't have thought about it.
Yeah.
And so that'll get my funny bone sometimes. Yeah. All right. So I sort of shared, 3 movies to describe my humor, and I'm not going to ask you for like, hey, can you summarize your humor in 3 movies? But just, I know you've mentioned a couple. You want to give us like maybe 3 examples of just some comedy movies that you really enjoy, just so we get a sense of.
Yeah, I'll kind of give you a little bit because like I said, I wrote down several movies and I've talked about like different little snippets of things that made me laugh. But I kind of went like. I think of it like generationally. What I was thinking was funny when I was younger. Airplane was so funny to me, and I don't know that would hold up at all for people like my kids' age. If I showed that to them, I don't know if they would just sit there or if they would think it was funny. I don't know. That movie is from 1980, and it's hard to explain. I mean, it just literally never stops trying to be funny. I bet no more than 5 to 10 seconds go by without a sight gag or a physical comedy of some kind. And it also has that, like, Leslie Nielsen's in it, and he's got the dry, like, I am serious and don't call me Shirley.
He's so good. And it's so amazing that to know the behind the scenes of that is that he had never done comedy before. And he was like, I didn't know I could be funny.
Yeah.
And he just plays it serious.
Yep.
And it ends up being so funny. And then that becomes his career for like the next 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And he rattles off the Naked Gun movies and plenty of other absurd movies. Spy Hard was a movie that is not a good movie, but there's still moments in it that I remember because his line delivery is so good. There's a great moment where he's supposed to be meeting this character and he's got the picture in the envelope, and when he meets the person, they're literally like exactly in the pose of the envelope. He's like, and his line is, "You can never be too sure," as he's comparing the two. And it just
he's funny.
It's such a terrible movie, but he's so funny at delivering the most absurd lines. So serious.
Yeah, Airplane was just always funny to me. I grew up watching it. It always cracked me up. Then I'll jump ahead a little bit. I mean, I'm like you. I had a lot more than I thought I would. Like I already mentioned Ace Ventura. I'll stick with that one. That's early '90s, so you're out of the '80s, and like as I was like Bill Murray and Chevy Chase and all those guys, they're almost the generation before me. So I thought they were funny. I love Ghostbusters. That's one of my favorite movies. But they weren't like, these are my guys. So when I was in the early 90s, like Sandler or Jim Carrey or some of these guys, I was old enough where I could be like, these are my guys. Like, these guys are funny. So, like, Ace Ventura and Happy Gilmore are two, like, in the mid-90s that really stuck with me. I think a lot of Sandler's movies actually have not aged that well. Like, you go watch The Waterboy now, and I just think that is a terrible movie, and I hate his voice. I can't believe Kathy Bates was in that movie. Like, I just don't like that movie at all.
Yeah, I have not watched it in a long time, and I've had a hard time finding the desire to go back and watch it. And I loved it when it came out.
I did too. But Happy Gilmore definitely, I think, has really held up well, and it is funny. It's ridiculous, of course. It's sometimes the comedy is like what I was saying earlier that I don't like. Like, oh, this guy fell down the stairs. But sometimes, as much as something can annoy me, sometimes it just works.
Yeah.
And I don't know what makes it work versus not work, but
I mean, and the one thing Sandler did is he did a great job with those, as you talked about it, movie summary in like a sentence or two.
Yeah.
And Happy Gilmore's got a great premise of what if golf wasn't boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's more to that. It's more of what if you take this wild card and put him in the gentleman's game.
But you're right though.
But yeah.
What if all of a sudden golf was exciting and fun and so yeah, Happy Gilmore's one, and then I wanted to think of a more modern movie, but I really had a hard time. Something I did think of this is just gonna be a weird episode that is actually really funny. Wolf of Wall Street.
It is.
It's really funny.
If you had to put it in a genre, it should probably be in comedy.
I think honestly, it is almost more of a comedy than anything else. And I mean, talk about Forgetting Sarah Marshall being rough. Wolf of Wall Street makes Forgetting Sarah Marshall look like Care Bears. I mean, that is a rough movie, but it is funny. It's really funny. It's got some really funny physical stuff, like when kind of a famous scene when Leo and Jonah Hill have taken the
Quaaludes,
the excessive amount of drugs, and that's physical comedy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of got like I was talking about in Pulp Fiction. Oh, I just shot Marvin in the face. It's just it pulls humor out of like these. Like Matthew McConaughey doing cocaine in the middle of a restaurant in broad daylight. It just pulls comedy out of these, like, I don't want to say taboo situations, but just these, well, I guess maybe kind of.
I mean, it is a movie that is about excess.
Yeah.
Just like everything being so over the top.
So over the top, yeah. So those are some, just real quick, I'll just go through. I wrote down like Airplane, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, I think is a funny movie, which... Maybe the blurring of genres does go back a little farther than we thought, because Back to the Future is not a comedy.
Right.
It's a kind of a sci-fi adventure comedy, a little bit of romance. Like, it had a lot going on there.
It did, yeah.
I talked about it a couple weeks ago, the movie Clue. Yeah. Always cracked me up. Yeah. And that is I guess it almost goes without saying, but like just put funny people in a room together. Mm-hmm. And just kind of let them play off of each other. And I don't know why they don't do that more often.
Yeah.
Like, that's just a smart, just get a bunch, like Apatow kind of does this, I guess, where it's just like, just flood your movie with funny people and just kind of let them do their thing. Yeah. And really the scenario almost doesn't matter that much. Clueless is a movie I've always thought is funny. Again, there's no real physical humor in that movie. That's just funny.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of satire. Like this
satire,
it's close to real, but exaggerated.
An exaggerated version of real life. It's kind of funny. I did write Dumb and Dumber down. Christmas Vacation I'm listing way more than 3. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Christmas Vacation has just always been a funny movie to me, and I don't like Chevy Chase at all. Yeah, I don't really typically find him funny, but I do like Christmas Vacation a lot.
Yeah,
and then like you said, I pull a lot of humor out of like Deadpool, Thor Ragnarok. All the Avenger movies have their share of humor, even though they're not comedies; they're superhero movies. But
right. Yeah, no, those are good movies. I'm gonna kind of match you. I've made a list and I started organizing a little bit by decade, so. I'll try to just give like one, maybe 2 each decade. So 80s, I probably wouldn't normally say Princess Bride here because it's such an important movie, but I'm going to go a little more off the typical path for me and say Fletch. Chevy Chase, and I'm not typically that huge of a Chevy Chase fan. Fletch is probably my favorite Chevy Chase character. Yeah. And I think it goes back to another thing of things that I like, things that make me funny or that I find funny. And I think characters who will say jokes or kind of mock people to their faces where the other people don't even realize it's happening. Of course, as the audience, you pick up on it. Yeah. But I love
that. That's that entire movie.
And I find like I'll do that. I'll make jokes to people all the time that are just for me. Yeah. They don't even know I'm making a joke. And I'm, I can kind of laugh. And sometimes, I'll tell them, I'm like, sorry, like that one was just for me. I know you don't get what I'm saying. And that's Fletch. Somebody who just always interested in it. He amuses himself by just making jokes.
That is literally, that's the entire movie.
Yeah, exactly. For the 90s, we've mentioned several of them. And man, there's a lot of ones I want to give a shout out to. So just a couple of them I just want to make sure I mention is Big Lebowski, because the Coen brothers doing comedy. And I love the premise of a movie where they said they want to make a movie where the plot is impossible to follow and ultimately doesn't matter. Yeah. And that's exactly what that movie is.
Talk about a movie that's hard to explain.
Oh, yeah.
Or put into a category.
Right. There's Something About Mary.
Yeah, that was really a big deal.
But the main one I just wanted to focus on for a minute is Tommy Boy. Got the shirt on. I think Chris Farley is hilarious, but I think Chris Farley only made one good movie. Yeah. And that's Tommy Boy.
Tommy Boy.
I think he does funny things in some of his other movies, but his other movies are all just pretty bad. They are. And I think him and Spade were so magical together. Yeah. Because you've got Farley's the big, lovable doofus, and Spade's the straight, the guy, snarky,
but like the hard-hitting sarcasm.
Which, man, Spade's had a weird career because early in his career he always played that. Like, he's smart and kind of nerdy, and then he's shifted into the Joe Dirt, like, roles where he's a total doofus, and now even he's, I'm not sure.
I don't even know really who he is now. Yeah, where he lands kind of in movies.
Yeah. So But Tommy Boy is just so much fun. There's an earnestness to it. Like, I think it's the best one of his movies because he gets to play kind of the big dumb guy, but he's the most lovable version of it as Tommy Callahan. He actually does have some competence to him.
Yeah.
Like he's a people person and he figures all that out. So he's not like some of his other movies. He's just so dumb.
Yeah.
And like, I just fall over everything. And, and it's...
The 80s and 90s had a lot of those kind of characters. Like, on the surface, they seem like an idiot, but once you kind of get past that, they're actually like... And Tommy Boy's... It's a pretty smart written movie. Like, it's clever, but he actually, like, there's a good scene there where he's kind of cons the waitress into making him some food, and David Spade's like, that's how you need to sell stuff. And one thing I think, were you done with your list? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was done with the 90s, but 2000s, of course, I already mentioned a couple of them with Forgetting Sarah Marshall and Kung Pao. So I'll kind of just leave it at those because I already mentioned those. And then the 2010s, I already kind of mentioned most of the ones on this list, but Everybody Wants Some, which is Richard Linklater's spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused. And one movie that I actually really enjoy, and I think it's kind of underrated, is Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping, which is
the Lonely Island
guys doing a mockumentary, and
it's really funny. I don't know how those guys... I'm glad you brought them up. I don't know how they didn't make it big in movies. Those guys are really funny.
Yeah. And again, that's another R-rated one with, the disclaimer thrown on it. But it is much like Anchorman, a guy who is so sure of himself but is such an idiot and a buffoon. That's fun to watch. So, that sort of.
I like Andy Samberg. I just feel like he hasn't quite... he probably found it on TV with Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He didn't quite find the movie like Hot Rod, which is really not a good movie, but it's kind of lovable. And
it definitely falls under that category of movie that's almost more fun to talk about and quote with your friends than actually
sit down and watch.
Because it will just sort of like dumb it just beats you over the head with how dumb it is.
Yeah.
But I think that's actually a great pivot point to how I wanted to end this, is just talk about how I think comedy, for the most part, has thrived on television, especially more recently than it has in movies. And of course,
Office,
we know,
Brooklyn
as we
Nine-Nine.
say, you're an Office fan. And that's probably more where you're going to go when you want to laugh, is you're going to go to those shows and
Parks and Rec, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I think that maybe that's why we don't have as many good comedy movies, because maybe the talent is just going to TV.
I don't know. I think one thing that happens in comedy is that, like, I was going to say this when you were talking about Chris Farley, sometimes people discover, a character, or they discover what works for them. Like, Chris Farley is a great example. He did it in Tommy Boy. I think Melissa McCarthy is a good example. She did it in Bridesmaids, where you create, again, like I was talking about at the beginning, you create a character, right? And it takes off, and it's loved. And like Melissa McCarthy in Bridesmaids, she is, in that movie, she creates this character. She got an Oscar nomination for that movie. And her character was kind of I'm kind of raunchy, and like I'm just funny through my dialogue, and my dialogue is kind of weird. But anyway, and then they just don't stop playing that character. And I'm not trying to pick on, I'm trying to fire shots at Melissa McCarthy, but like she does that and becomes really famous really quick and really popular. And but then to me, and I haven't seen every movie she's done, but it does kind of feel like for the longest time after that, she's just playing another version of that character. And that's what happened with Farley, where it was like Tommy Boy is at the time, it was creative and it was funny, and he could combine I'm a big clumsy guy, but I'm sweet and stuff. And then he just, even though he didn't have a long career because he died too young, but he just never stopped playing that character. And that happens too, I think, in comedies, where you just go, man, I've seen this. I've seen this so many times.
Yeah, Will Ferrell had the same thing happen. I have several friends who were like, I don't like Will Ferrell. He just shouts in every movie. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, he did it for a lot of movies. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Which is probably why Anchorman is my most beloved movie, even though he does shout sometimes in that. He's in a glass cage of emotion. But it just felt different than his typical shouting.
Jack Black sometimes feels like he's just always Jack Black.
And the guy that we mentioned is maybe the modern most popular funny man, Kevin Hart.
Kevin Hart.
He has a very distinct Kevin Hart shtick, and I've wondered for a while, like, I have nothing against Kevin Hart. I'm not looking for his career to end, but I just wonder, like, at some point, he's going to play Kevin Hart so many times, people are going to be like, all right, we're done with it.
And I do think that happens. Even with directors, like the Apatow movies, they all do follow, even though his movies are about different things, they do kind of, I don't know, it just kind of like, it all started to feel very familiar.
Yeah, you're right, yeah. And so, and of course, it happens in every genre. There's just always...
It does. It's not just comedy.
Genres, yeah, but you can see it distinctly happening, too, in comedies. And I think the era that we're in is TV comedy is what's ruling the day. Yeah. And I wonder if a lot of it just has to do with budgets, we talked about how that sort of mid-tier movie is what's really not getting made anymore. It's all either cheap stuff or big, huge.
It either costs $1 million or it costs $250 million.
And I think that's maybe why comedies have disappeared. Because a lot of the comedies that we mentioned that are older, have those budgets. Like, I don't know what Ghostbusters would cost today. Of course, they've made some more recent Ghostbusters, but with effects and all those things, like, it's probably mid-tier, and they don't make that anymore. But these TV shows that are a lot more
cost-friendly, I guess,
maybe,
and there probably is something to be said about, if something's really fun, like The Office, and a lot of the 30-minute TV shows, it's 22 minutes, with commercials and stuff. So maybe it's just funnier to watch someone do their shtick for 22 minutes than it is for an hour and 45 minutes, maybe.
That's very true. I also think the benefit of TV shows is you get a little time to find your footing. You know? Like, how many comedies, TV shows, their first season is one of their better ones? Usually not.
The first season of The Office is not good at all.
Usually it's like, a couple seasons they actually find their groove, and then they really hit their comedy stride. And so maybe that's what it is. Maybe comedy just needs time to sort of workshop into...
I think that's a really great point, because two of my favorite shows are The Office and Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Both of those have really bad first seasons.
Yeah, you can just sort of skip the first season.
You can completely skip the first season. And The Office, which a lot of people think is just the funniest thing ever. But, it starts bad, in my opinion, in the first season, which is only 6 episodes. Really hits its stride in like seasons 2 and 3. Seasons 4 and 5, they know who they are. They're doing their thing. And then you do start to see a decline, So maybe this comedy just has a small window of where something is, I guess, like anything with a joke, it's funny the first time, it's funny the second time, but the 40th time, it just doesn't. Maybe comedies are just the harder things to make.
Yeah, and it's the same with... I think rewatching comedies. I think the first, like we said, some of my favorite comedies are ones I didn't love the first time.
Yeah.
And then as you familiarize yourself with the jokes, it becomes funnier the second, third, fourth time. But maybe by the 10th time, you're like, okay, it's lost. There's an arc to the joke. There's an arc to how many times you rewatch it. There's an arc to how it, a show builds into its rhythms and rides those rhythms like a wave that's crested, and then eventually it fizzles out. So maybe that's why TV, because it has so many more at-bats, it can find that rhythm and then play through until it runs out of steam.
Well, another thing I did write down, too, is I said a lot of times comedies just won't age well because they're finding, sometimes, not all the time, but a lot of times they're finding humor in what's happening at the time. So then you watch it, 15 years later, and, something that was funny to me in 1986... I could probably show it to my kids and it would just be dead silence in the room. I can't necessarily think of a movie off the top of my head, but, a lot of times comedies are just very much of the time. And it's funny in the moment, or you get humor out of something that's happening in the culture in the moment, and then, you fast forward 15 or 20 years and it just seems dated and...
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. These are just thoughts I have. That's just kind of thinking as to why comedy maybe just doesn't always work, or why they're not just an abundance of comedies right now. Like we talked a few episodes ago, you talked about seeing the Jennifer Lawrence movie, No Hard Feelings, and you were like, it just wasn't funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's stating the obvious to the extreme, but your comedy needs to be funny. And there's just nothing that's more awkward to watch than something that's trying to be funny and just failing.
Yeah. Well, Andy, I really appreciate you indulging me. Jumping into a genre that's not your favorite, having a conversation.
You can pay me back we can do a horror movie themed episode, and I'll be comfortable and you'll be uncomfortable.
Yeah, which, just calendar-wise, we're approaching the Halloween season, which would make sense to dive into comedies. I think, just looking forward to the future, I've said all along, I want us to get a good 10 episodes down of just the two of us, getting our rhythm, letting the audience get used to us. And then at some point, I wouldn't mind bringing in some guests. And I know we've got at least one guest lined up for an episode we've been talking about from the beginning to talk about a certain sports movie.
Yes.
And it was brought up to me again today. They asked, when are we going to go on and talk about the sports movie?
You were smart to wait because now we're building, there's demand.
Yes.
People are asking us to be on the show.
Exactly. So,
okay, before we go, I did want to ask, can I just do a couple rapid fire questions for you?
Absolutely.
Did we actually name our favorite comedy of all time? Did we pinpoint it down to one? Do you have one?
I don't think we did, and I
don't know that I could come up with my just favorite comedy of all time.
Right, and I feel like it's one of those things too. If you ask me on a given day,
I know it might change. Yeah.
So,
and I also wanted to ask do you have a moment that sticks out? Do you remember most likely being in the theater, like the hardest you've ever laughed in a movie?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, because I really racked my brain about this, and I just couldn't. I don't know that I came up with one answer.
I have an answer, and it's such a dumb answer because it's not even close to the funniest moment in a movie. But I just remember watching the movie The Whole Nine Yards with my friends at one of my friends' houses, and it was late at night, and the Kevin Pollak character has just a funny way of speaking, and he does these awkward pauses, and he's talking about Bruce Willis' character, and he says he's this rat who doesn't deserve to be breathing. The air, like that long pause, it just hit me, my friends, just right.
Yeah,
and we started laughing. We had to pause the movie, and we just cackled for like a minute straight, and it's such a stupid little throwaway line, and it just the timing of it just hit us just right, and we laughed incredibly hard at it.
I will say, I don't want to sound completely negative about comedies. That is the charm of comedies, is that sometimes it just catches you in the moment, or you're up at 3 a.m. and so you're slap happy, and then it's like just some dumb line. I remember when I was in high school having a friend, and it was the same thing. We were up, and it was 3 a.m. We were eating chips and drinking Pepsi, and probably on a sugar high. And it was Clue, actually, where Tim Curry's like, I'm shouting, and like a candlestick or something falls on his head, and he just falls. And same thing, we had to pause the movie. It's not even that funny, but that is the upside of comedies, where you can sometimes they just catch you in the right moment, and the shared experience of just cracking up with somebody is a great experience.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I thought I'd end on a positive note about comedies, because I don't want to sound negative about comedies.
Absolutely. Well, once again, Andy, I just want to emphasize, I don't think any less of you for not loving comedies, because you are one of the funniest people I know.
You are giving me too much praise, but I do appreciate it.
Yeah. That's what I'm here for. I want to build you up. I want to be an encourager. I want to call out the good I see in you.
Thank you.
So thank you for
it was a fun episode.
Doing the episode. Thank you everybody who listened and
thanks for listening last week, giving us our biggest views.
Absolutely. Let us know what it was that you guys liked about that.
Do we need to do more drafts?
The draft formula. Just want us to talk more about
80s action,
because we probably could.
Because let me tell you, I could squeeze another 26 episodes out of 80s action movies.
Or maybe we just next time slide into 90s action, because I already started making my list, and I got to tell you, I like it. So
absolutely, the draft will be back. I think that's safe to say. That was fun.
I think so. All right, well, thank you, and we will see you guys next time.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm